Welcome to Winning the Challenger Sale, where we help you win the sales moments that matter every day. Today, we're finishing out our January theme, Why Aren't You Winning? Last week, we discussed with Jeff Hendricks how sales leaders can enhance forecast accuracy in 2024, right from the early stages of the buying process. And this week, I am so excited to continue the conversation around helping our teams win with my personal friend, mentor, the CEO of Truckstop, Kendra Tucker. Kendra is the perfect person to lead us in this conversation, as she has spent more than 15 years leading teams across a variety of SaaS and recurring revenue companies. Kendra has delivered double-digit growth both organically and inorganically, launching new products and folding in acquisitions. She's also led many C-level positions before becoming a CEO, including a CRO and a COO. I'm thrilled today to dive into our topic and hear more about Kendra's thoughts on why teams aren't winning. Get a deeper understanding of how top insights from 2023 and how leaders should best apply these learnings to help their teams excel in 2024. Kendra, welcome to Winning the Challenger Sale.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
I know. I'm so excited. Usually we're drinking wine in the Arlington area together, so this is not nearly as fun, but we'll make it work. Before we get into the topic of why aren't you winning, I'd love to hear you reflect on your journey to the C-suite. You've led teams, obviously go to market, sales, customer success. How have those experiences really helped you lead your organization now as a CEO?
Yeah, it has been quite a journey. I think the way I got here was, it might look circuitous actually on paper. I really spent actually time on the product side of the business or of businesses before I moved into commercial leadership. And then ultimately I picked up strategy and operations that got me into the CEO role. And having spent time in all those different functions, I think has just given me call it a panoramic view of how an organization operates. Sometimes actually I say to my team, I'm like, the problem with that is because I've done enough in a variety of parts of the business, I get super dangerous. So we have to watch out for me. Like I know a lot about product. I know a lot about sales and marketing, but the way you practice in those functions has really evolved over the course of time, particularly with technological advancement. And so I know enough to really get deep into the details, but I really had to learn to trust the leaders who run those functions, right, to make the best decision for our business overall. So it's been good to have that functional experience and then bring that into the CEO role as well.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Alice Hyman, and we were talking about how very few CEOs necessarily come from like the go-to-market background or the marketing or sales background. And we were talking about my background, obviously in sales and marketing. And I was like, it's so interesting because to me, those are just such, to your point, like those are really those skills that really, I believe, help you become a really good COO, CEO. But if you look at I think public companies, about 70% of them come more from operations. So I'd love your thoughts on like those skills and, how that has evolved for you.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's one of the things that probably, as our board was thinking about who to put into the CEO role, that go-to-market experience I brought was probably attractive. I've heard a lot of boards and investors say this as having somebody in the top job who's had experience organically driving growth within a company. Ends up being a skill set that they want in their CEOs. So, like I said, it can be a double-edged sword, right? They spend a lot of time thinking about what growth could look like for our business, really challenging our leaders to think about how to not just get high single-digit growth, but really propel us into the, higher double digits. And the knowledge I have there, like I said, it can make me pretty dangerous. And at the same time, because I've done the job, I have a lot of understanding and empathy, right, for what it takes, like just the sheer grit and the work ethic, right? I say this all the time. Like one of the reasons why I loved sales out of all of the jobs that I had was I truly admire the hustle, like the heart and hustle that sellers bring to their job every day. It's inspiring and it's different than in other functions. So
yeah, you and I have talked previously about like the hustle and the flex, right? Like the ability to be able to flex sometimes, because that is so key, right? To being able to, especially if you're a seller right now selling during a relatively uncertain economy, you need to flex, you need to have a lot of grit. You need to have resiliency, like all the things that really truly do also make a really good CEO. So we met way back when. Now it feels like in the Vista era. So I had sold the business to Vista. You were on the Vista consulting side, and one of the things that we worked on were the playbooks, the I guess forever popular Vista go to market playbooks. And I bet you get this a lot because I get this all the time. People are like, how important is the playbook? Do you need the Vista playbook? How does that shape your perspective on go to market? So I would be curious. I always have different answers, and I'd be curious to get your perspective on that.
I think it's a great question. So one of the things that attracted me to the Vista ecosystem was the science of private equity
Yeah.
and Vista, right? Being, they're the leader in that space. They've just really developed a name for themselves. I truly believe that sales is the perfect blend of art and science. And
Mm-hmm.
so to answer the question directly, do the Vista playbooks matter? The answer is yes and no. So
Yeah.
it's really right. It is both the art and the science. So the Vista playbooks are the science, and truthfully, the secret sauce, it is hard to replicate. The secret sauce is the vehement execution of
Mm-hmm.
the playbook and the process and the rigor and the hygiene that comes with that. Super important. But all the bestsellers will tell you it's not just the science of it. You have to have the finesse and the panache to be able to deliver that in a process. And so the art matters as well. I've seen a number of sales managers and sellers who have only executed by the book, not necessarily the Vista playbook, but
Right.
just
Right.
executed by the book, right? Being overly scientific in their approach. And ultimately, that it ends up with okay performance, but you need the creativity, right? Which is like, how do I elasticize this process to help me get this deal done in the end? That matters as well. So I applaud Vista and all the companies who have executed the playbooks really well. But I think the really high performance comes from adding the art to it also.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And we even talk about this with Challenger. Obviously, we have a methodology, but to your point, it's got to have the finesse, the panache, the creativity. Not everybody does Challenger cookie cutter because Challenger is certainly a framework, but it really does need, to your point, that art, that something special, because we need to get to know our customers, and every customer needs something a little bit different. So
Yeah.
um, no, completely agree. I'm glad we answered that question similarly, so I'm glad to see that I'm aligned with you on that. But it was really for me like a great learning experience. The time I spent with Kendra and Vista, once again diving into pipeline and conversion rates and just all, like, to your point, like all of that is so helpful as you start to think about KPIs and running a business and all of that. So it certainly gives you that great foundation, I would say. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I know you're extremely gifted because we've worked together in the sales process, operations, and of course you had your COO role at Truckstop. And what are some of the issues, I think, process issues you've seen with sales teams, that sometimes hold them back? Because I do think that we tend to, I think it's like when the economy is good, everyone's like, we don't need processes, and then when the economy starts to slide, people are like, oh, we need all these processes, and we tend to like over engineer, right? So like, what are some of the things that you think, given right now, that you've seen that really make sure that you have these processes?
Yeah. So I think a couple, one at a more macro level, we taught this via Challenger when it was part of CEB as part of the Vista ecosystem. But the focus on a value-based sale is always important.
Hmm.
And it's really easy to talk about value based selling and to talk about some of the components that go into it. And I hear a lot of people using the terminology. But what I really came to appreciate in the Vista ecosystem is that value based selling is not a one time or even a few times a year training experience. It truly is a system. This is really important,
Right, right.
right? It can't just be like, I've got a star seller who knows how to insert value and customer voice into their sales process. It has to be that value based selling permeates how we think about sales enablement, how we think about sales operations, like what you measure in order to get down to are we delivering or achieving a value based sale when our sellers go to market, how you think about building out your systems. So what your Salesforce instance looks like should also
Mhm.
match approach to the value-based selling process. So that is key. What I've seen, what I've observed, both via CEB and like I said, within the Vista ecosystem, is there was always investment in the training experience, but that's just one element of it, and how you think about managers enabling it, how you build it into the system itself, literally building it into Salesforce, that really matters, and it stands the test of time. So whether it's a tough period for sales or an awesome period for sales, that type of baseline rigor is really important. So that would be thing number one. And then thing number two, I think, is the presence of, for sales leaders, is the presence of sales operations as a really important
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
partner. I mean, it's so key. So I've had to hire a number of sales leaders over the course of time. And I'll tell you, I think it's my second question that I ask in the interview, tell me about how you structure your team. And what
Yeah.
I'm listening for is, I'm really listening for them to say, as sales leader, to say, I always need to have my right-hand person, and that's my sales operations
Yep.
leader.
Yep.
And the reason why
That
it's so
data is so important.
the data, the metrics are so important. And honestly, when you think about a sales leader, that person needs to be holistic, right? They need to be
Yep.
motivational as well as operational, but they need a partner who can dive deep into the weeds and pull out trends and patterns that they can see in the data, like expose them for them. They can help forecast and model, if we change this part of our process, here's what could potentially happening to our bookings per rep and the productivity there. So you can never be, I think, as a sales leader, without a really strong sales operations partner who can translate what's happening in the data into actions and things that you can do differently for your sales team as a whole. So those would be, I think, the two
Yeah.
things, right?
And I think that's actually a really good point. As you and I both come from early stage companies, or more, earlier on in your career. I know
Yeah,
you're obviously bigger than smaller, like, yeah. But,
yeah.
when in Vista, obviously the fund that I was involved in was more early stage. And that is one of the things I also learned from Vista is RevOps is so key, right? So the idea of, whether it's sales operations or RevOps, having someone who can really tell you, to your point, hey, this isn't working, especially during this interesting economy, right? Like, we're getting, like, for example, we analyzed our pipeline last year. And one of the things we found in Q3 was that our pipeline was mostly made up of SMB and mid-market accounts. Well, our
Mhm.
ICP is more enterprise accounts. And we were like,
Mm.
okay, what's going on with our pipeline, right? Like, what do we need to do to correct that, right? And like you, I like to get in the weeds too. So I'm sitting here being like, what's going on with the pipeline? What's going, like, so I do think, it's really interesting because, we were trying to figure out what was going on with mostly our existing customer base. And what we realized was that our new customer base for the past, 24 months had been really more SMB mid-market customers who don't necessarily stay on as long. They're not our enterprise customers that stay on for, 3 to 5 years. And so what we were seeing was that it was really a pipeline problem, but we thought it was more of a renewal problem, right? So it's
Mm.
interesting, right? When you start to, like,
Mhm.
take all those pieces, and you need someone, to your point, who's going to be able to sit there and dive into that account segmentation and all that data, because right now we are asking our sales leaders to do a lot, to your point. Like, we want them to coach, but get the data, but also, get involved in these deals. Like, so we are asking more and more of our sales leaders. So they do need kind of that right hand person.
Yeah, I totally agreed. Totally agreed.
So yeah. So as you think of, sales teams, I know your team is doing really well, and, but when we think about people not necessarily getting that level of success, and we just talked about process and sometimes poor communication. I just talked about low quality leads sometimes.
Mm.
What are you kind of seeing, as we start 2024? What do you think some of the bigger obstacles will be this year with sales teams and their success?
I think everybody, well, I guess we can compare notes on this, is at least
Yeah.
in our industry, when we think about going to market, there's still quite a bit of uncertainty in the
Mhm.
economy, right? And so I think there's a lot of hesitation on the part of buyers on whether or not they should invest. I think there's a lot of question marks about what will happen with rates this year,
Yeah.
which pinches cash and again, just how people think about spending their money. So how to overcome that, I think, will be a collective challenge that we all will face. I don't know that we necessarily have a silver bullet, right, to figuring out
Mhm.
how do we get over that. But I think there'll be a lot of experimentation around how we communicate the value of our product, how we help our customers achieve real ROI through our product. And so even this year, as I've been talking to our product team and our product marketing team, getting really crisp about here's
Yeah.
exactly what our product delivers. And we've got some amazing additions to our product team, actually, who've been our customer before. This is so
Oh,
fantastic for us
fantastic.
because
Yeah.
the customer voice that they bring and how they talk
Mhm.
about here's on a daily basis with our product how many thousands of dollars you could save by using our product is just it's a different kind of ROI than we've had the ability to communicate before. And so I'm really hopeful and optimistic about how that will show up in the sales cycle this year. But I can sense, with with sales teams, it always feels better to have a sure thing where you're like, there's no
Yeah.
uncertainty. People are ready to buy. Let's go for it. And these
Right,
new
right.
I don't know. We're still going to have to navigate some of that uncertainty, but I think we'll be even more equipped, right? 2023 was a year of a lot of uncertainty. And so,
Mhm.
as I've said to the team, I'm like, the good news is we've already done that. We know what that feels like, right? We've experienced it as an obstacle. And this year, I find us to be just even more prepared to tackle it head on versus like if we were at the start of an uncertain cycle.
Yeah, no, I was previously right before this podcast recording, I was actually did our facilitator town hall, which is with all our facilitators for our workshops, and I was talking to them exactly. It's funny because I literally said that verbatim, like 2023 was a year of just adjusting, trying to kind of adjust to
Okay.
the economy, and now I feel like although our year wasn't as stellar as we wanted it to be, we learned a lot. We're able to refocus, and like I do feel like we're coming into 2024 with like a great plan, and we've already had a really great January. So I do think it, to your point, like you sometimes just need to take a little bit of time, readjust. One of the things that we've really been focusing on is from an indecision perspective is this whole idea of not just ROI, which you talked about, and obviously value-based selling so critical and so important, but this concept of COI, which is that cost of inaction, right? So I think
Mm.
our teams are so focused on ROI. But the thing about ROI is that, for Challenger, for example, that could be 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. And people want that magic, like quick hit, right? And so when we talk about COI, it's a little bit more to say, like, okay, you could not buy sales training. So your numbers aren't great and you're PE backed and they want to see a 15% growth. So what are you going to do instead of coaching and sales training? What else are you going to do differently? Because what you're doing right now isn't working. And so I think having those really frank conversations without, being like too dogmatic, but really trying to say like, okay, you're not going to do this, but what else are you going to do instead? Because if you do nothing, obviously we know like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so kind of that same mindset.
Yeah, agree. I remember that actually in Vista, in all of the trainings and that we did with the portfolio companies. We do this section on competitive differentiation. And one of the competitors, I mean, we said there was basically three types of
Yeah.
competitors, which is competitors you actually buy something from, right? So other vendors. The competitor could be an internal team who's building the solution, right? And then there was a competitor that was do nothing.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
was, we put it actually to your point of inaction. It was literally listed as a competitor to what we were trying to sell. Because otherwise, you'd find that sales teams, sales leaders would forget about it
Yep.
as
Yep.
this lurking uh, uh, item, person, thing that could derail a sales cycle. So I love that you've now turned it into an acronym, a COI. I love that, the cost of inaction. It's true. It's and I think actually in the Vista ecosystem, I think it was somewhere between 40 and 50% of sales were lost because of people
Yeah.
deciding to do nothing.
Yeah, we just did actually a research study, and we partnered with Matt Dixon on this. And one of the things that we found was that so it's almost in this economy. Obviously, depends on your market, depends on your industry, all of that. But it's up to 85% people are
Really?
losing to no decision, which is
Oh
like
my goodness.
insane, right? Like, can you
Wow.
imagine? Like,
Oh, geez.
So, part of that, right, is retooling your sales reps. I think, getting them to a point where they're not just features and functionality, right? They're really, to your point, like COI, like, but I think the issue that we're hearing is that people, because there's been a lot of flux in the market, people, CROs, heads of sales, at least who we sell to, there's been a lot of change. People have been losing jobs. People, so it's like almost, so we talk about it, we joke, it's like FOMO, but FUMU. It's like fear of messing up, right? Like, so it's like this idea that like people are so worried, about losing their jobs, or if I pull the trigger on this decision, that could get me fired, right? Because the
Right.
economy is tough and I don't have to go look for a new job in a rough economy. So people are a little bit more concerned about that. So they're like, that's where I think that nice to have versus need to have is really making that business case for that is so critical, because I do think there is that struggle.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm so startled to hear that that's really common.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
I
a sign
mean,
of
once
the
again, depending on the industry, but like SaaS is,
times.
obviously taken quite a hit, right?
Yeah, that's really quite high. Mm.
So, all right. Well, switching gears, you've been at Truckstop for the last 5 years, and they've multipled in size. As a software provider, obviously you've got automated services on top of freight matching capabilities. So, as you've been growing so much, it can change your processes, your infrastructure, your hiring. I know you did a lot with your leadership team to kind of figure out who are the right players, the right people to be on the team. So, how has that really manifested itself from like a change management perspective, and just like, does your feeling like your sales team, you have like the right players now?
Yeah, at Truckstop over the past few years, it's almost been like two really different environments to
Yeah.
operate in. So if you look at the pandemic run, right, from the second half of 2020 into the first half of 22, man, that time was totally wild. It was wild when you just think about the crazy spikes in growth and
Yeah.
demand that we saw. That's during the period when I was CRO partially and COO partially. So I really had not just a front row seat, but I was literally driving
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
steering the ship while we were going through that. And obviously, the way we ran our commercial teams during the pandemic run was all about how we grease all the processes so they went lightning fast, which was such a fascinating time, to be running
Yeah.
a sales org. You want to be in the position where you say, "Oh my God, there's too many leads. How
Yeah.
are there too many leads?" Right? It was quite the challenge, is what I would
Yeah.
describe it as. And then to experience, you get into the second half of 22, I was no longer directly leading the sales teams. I'd moved into the CEO position. And to go through then the correction, the way I would describe it, right, is like we
Yeah.
clearly, it had really gone almost too far. You hate to say it that way, but it
Yeah.
got
No, it was like famine. And then it was like, oh my God.
it was too much feast. and so
Yeah.
so it's like, it's like eating too much over the holidays. You're like, you got to
Right.
pull back and go on a diet. And so one of the things that we did during the high demand, truly high volume, incredibly high volume times was we took that moment to augment and solidify some of the sales processes that we
Mhm.
had. So at Truckstop, we have an incredibly high velocity, high volume selling
Right.
process. And there definitely had been some process in place, but we took it as an opportunity to create, rather to ensure that we had the right process. So we added value
Mhm.
based selling into our approach. And then we just got more methodical about how we measured our performance. So bringing some of that Vista style hygiene, right,
Yeah.
into the selling process. It wasn't that we had to do a lot of optimizing for it. I tell people, at that point, sometimes our LTV to CAC was like 6 to 1. It was
Wow. Yeah.
ridiculous. It was crazy. But Truckstop has always had a really healthy LTV to CAC, and so it was like tweaking some of the processes. And then as you get into the famine times, or at least the correction,
Right.
really those processes started to pay off, right? Having them in
Mhm.
place. And now it's given us the opportunity to really focus and think about how well are our managers leading the
Yeah.
sales team? So
Yeah.
not the sales leadership and the frontline sellers, but my sales leader and we spent a lot of time talking about how confident are we in the level of management? How well have we defined their roles? How well are they coaching and measuring the effectiveness of the sales team on a regular basis? And given that we have such a high volume, high velocity process, how are they very quickly inserting themselves
Yep.
into the process, right? To correct when we know that something is off track. So in our business, if we have just one off selling day, it will mess with the numbers for the whole month.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
it's incredibly
That's
fast.
intense.
It is intense. It's really quite fun. It's fun, but you've got to be on your game, So having managers who are paying close attention to input metrics and output metrics, understanding when they need to jump into a seller's day, right, to unstick something that's happening, is really important. So we've learned, I think, a lot. We've learned how to deal with really high volumes of demand and how to accelerate the process, and then we've now been learning how to make it almost like make it an ingrained methodical approach to how we sell. There's been a lot that we've learned over the past 4 years, and what's exciting is that it is always changing. There's always
Yeah.
something to learn, right? So I think we more and more have a really solid foundation on which to operate.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, you and I took over as CEOs kind of right around, or what, ended right around the same time. And like you
Yeah.
said, we're constantly changing, flexing. But I think I mean, I talk about Challenger as really like the last 3.5 years have been, for me personally as a CEO, the most I've grown as a CEO, or, for better or worse, right? Like I've had to learn to really flex, to grow, to be curious, to dive in when I needed to get in the weeds, to get out of the weeds. So yeah, I think all of those things.
That's right. To
Right.
understand
My
what
team's like, get out of the weeds. We don't want to talk to you about it.
I know, where they're like, leave us alone. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, totally. I get that. So, I mean, this has been such a great conversation. It's gone by so fast, but I do want to ask a few questions before we close, because I obviously could talk to you for hours. And we'll definitely do that soon. In a better setting than a Zoom Riverside conversation. But what excites you about kind of the future of sales? I mean, obviously we have a lot of people talking about AI and, but what do you think about when you think about, like, you're so good at culture and like sales culture, and like, what do you think about when you think about the future of sales and sales culture, sales teams? I mean, AI can be part of that. What kind of gets you excited?
So for us, one of the things that we continue to experiment with is how to lead sales teams in a virtual environment.
Mhm.
So our whole business at Truckstop is virtual. We went virtual, I think, in March of 2020. And at that point, our maybe 50 to 60% of our business was physically co-located in different cities. So we are headquartered in Idaho. So we had a healthy amount of our staff in
Yeah.
Idaho. And we also had offices in Phoenix and Chicago. And obviously, over the course of the pandemic, that's really changed. We still have a pretty strong contingent in our Idaho area, but we released our Phoenix and Chicago offices. And now I think thinking through how to continue in a virtual to hybrid format, that's something I spend a lot of time talking about with our commercial leaders and really thinking through. Our commercial leaders right now have done, I think, a really excellent job of creating this like virtual sales environment. So we still
Mhm.
do power hours. We still have daily stand-ups. We have a lot of the hygiene, and they have done, I think, just a really exceptional job bringing that into our technology. So via Teams, via SalesLoft, via like all of the different
Yeah.
systems that we use, right? Creating this almost like ecosystem that creates the four walls of a building. They've gotten pretty good at doing that. And what we're now thinking through is there an opportunity for us to hybridize this approach, right? So can we start setting up different hubs and different
Mhm.
locations, particularly, I think a lot about BDRs or
I know.
SDRs.
I was just gonna say that's all. Whenever keeps me. We've gone fully remote as well, and what keeps me up at
Yeah,
night is literally that.
the
Like,
BDRs. right?
Yeah.
You just think about what it's like to be in person. And right now, I think we might have a virtual gong, but you know you need a gong on a
Yeah,
floor.
I mean, and just like the leaderboard and just hearing the energy of people on calls or being like, I got this meeting or like, yeah, and
Yeah.
socially, right? Like I think just even getting to know it's usually your first job out of college and like getting to know people, right? Like and hearing the sellers on the call, your AEs, because you could learn from that by just I mean, I used to like listen to AEs on calls all the time and just think, oh, that's a really good I like the way they said that. I like the way they framed that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is what I'm saying about our team has gotten creative. So we have a buddy system where individual sellers can drop into each other's calls and do that today, which is great. But there's still something about like being in queues with your headset on and,
Yeah.
playing the games where you're like, if you say the word behoove into your pitch, if you say
Yeah.
right, then 10 points for you or like
Right,
whatever.
totally,
Or
totally.
everyone's standing up to do the power hour, whatever it is.
No,
Right?
absolutely.
So it's bringing that energy. We have done a really, I think, creative job of bringing it into a virtual format. And then I think across 24 and 25, it's how do we hybridize it and
Mhm.
where do we do that, particularly to better care for the junior entrants, right? The
Right.
BDR that we want to nurture and turn into star sellers, helping them have the opportunity to do that. So I'm looking forward to finding the right balance, or rather, maybe better to say, just like continued evolution there for sure. And honestly, look, I guess I could throw out what has really become a cliche with AI, but I have to tell you, I am really excited about it. My one of my
Yeah.
favorite sales technologies is Gong. I
Love gone.
love Gong. I love Gong. And I'm like, that was even before, Chat GPT became a thing. So imagine where we can go. Like, what will happen next? So
No.
I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, we actually just Challenger released a smart tracker with Ingong, so it can listen to your calls and tell you how much of a challenger you're acting like. So like
Oh, I love
even
that.
that, right? Those integrations have been so huge for us from an AI perspective. I agree with you. I'm super like excited about AI, but you and I come from tech, so of course we're
Yeah.
like because my whole thing is anything that helps me do my job better, like
Yeah.
I'm all for. Like,
I totally
I was like,
agree.
what can I plug into Chat GPT today? Like,
I know exactly. What can I ask Chat GPT today? I'm not sure the sellers are necessarily as excited about it as we are, but
yeah,
give it
yeah.
some time. Give it some time.
No, I totally agree. Well, Kendra, this was awesome, as I knew it would be, and I'm so excited to connect with you again. And wishing you all the luck as you head into the new year. But where should our audience? What's the best way for them to find you, connect with you?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am there. There you can find me under Kendra Tucker, obviously, or on the Truckstop page. Happy to connect with any of your listeners. And Hetty, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and thanks to all our listeners. You can find us on Spotify, podcast, or wherever. Oh, I just said that wrong. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, Kendra. This was fantastic.